Joining me on the show today is Amy Post. Nearly a decade ago, life for Amy and her family was completely normal and going well. She was married with 2 kids, but her world was quickly turned upside down when her daughter was diagnosed with malignant liver cancer at just 3 years old. She took on the job of becoming an advocate for her daughter's treatment as she underwent a liver transplant, several rounds of chemotherapy, infusions, transfusions, and stent placements. Despite this incredibly painful and uncertain time for her family, Amy fought for improvements in the hospital system and remained hopeful for her daughter's life. She shares how leaning into discomfort helped her navigate such a difficult time and how the power of perspective and living in the moment gave her strength to show up every single day. If you or someone you know is going through a difficult health battle, I know her story will fill you with hope and faith for the future. I can't wait for you to hear. Let's jump in. Hey, Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adrienne. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you have a pretty incredible story to share. I am excited for our listeners to hear. I think there's going to be some parts of it that may be difficult to hear, but I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm excited to share your story. Take us back. This all started about 10 years ago. I know you were a mom with young children, then 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So take me back to what life was like then.
Life was great. My family was healthy. My daughter was 3. My son was 6. My husband and I, had a great life. And it was, one of those things I think we all think about, getting married, maybe having kids, settling down. We had a beautiful house, great jobs. Nothing seemed to be, amiss. And I think many can resonate with a situation where, they're just not expecting, certain things or challenges that life can throw at them. And so I think, we can be very kind of unprotected and uncertain of how to handle things when they come our way. And so our situation, I think many people can relate because it's a situation we're hearing about more and more. But I had just some unusual thoughts, maybe some instincts for several months, about 6 months. My daughter was having just some sporadic temperatures, and we were calling the doctor weekly and or taking her into her pediatrician. We were told everything was fine, but of course my intuition and gut was really just kind of redirecting me. But yet, we were told everything was fine. And one day we were called by her daycare, and she was sitting down on the playground, not feeling well, and really just didn't want to play or engage. I really immediately felt that something was wrong, and I was hoping that my gut was wrong. I kept her home that next day. She had very sporadic temperatures and belly aches. We were thinking maybe appendicitis, nothing more than that. Then on the 3rd day, she spiked 104 temperature and was really just very, very sick, just unable to handle the pain. I think it was quite excruciating. And so my husband took her to the emergency room. It was pretty late on a Sunday evening that he took her to the emergency room. And he woke me up that next morning at 5, told me I needed to get our son on the bus and that he was taking our daughter to the hospital. He had received a phone call about 3:30 in the morning with the test results, and they weren't good. So I was supposed to actually leave on a business trip. It was a sales meeting to fly to California. I'm in the Midwest, and I thought, oh gosh, what is happening? Because I had a stomach ache the night before. And so I thought, it's nothing. Maybe it's just, it's nothing. I'm not going to think into it. We were sitting in the hospital for about 8 hours and tests were being run. The physician walks into, this little tiny white room that he has us in and tells us he's deeply sorry, but he has to tell us that our 3-year-old our 3-year-old daughter has malignant liver cancer, and they have a room ready for us. She'll be starting chemotherapy, blood transfusions. She will be scheduled for a full liver transplant, and everything is scheduled, and we have to get upstairs.
Wow.
And our life just changed within a moment. It was excruciating.
Yeah.
You don't know what to think or feel. You have absolutely no idea actually what's even happened. And I remember the day like it was yesterday. And so I think in those moments of just panic, fear, uncertainty, we really we can go, several different directions. And mine was, just to find out as much information as I possibly could. So my husband took my son home and left my daughter and I there. There was really no discussion, and that's just kind of how it was. The next morning was pretty significant. I remember waking up about 5 a.m., my normal time. I went across the hallway to get a cup of coffee. I was getting ready to meet with the liaison. They had a hospital liaison that pretty much just mentored you and really told you, what was happening, the journey, and what the processes were going to be. And I remember getting a cup of coffee, and there was a gentleman in the coffee room, and I asked him what he was there for. And he said that his son had been diagnosed about my daughter's age with cancer, and that things were fine for several years, and they were back again. He was 13 and he had brain cancer.
Oh gosh.
And I remember walking out of that room with just tears pouring down my face. And I remember just kind of under my breath, just starting to pray. And I said, I have absolutely nothing to feel bad about. I have nothing to be sad about. I have to find something to feel grateful for every single day. And I have to count my blessings every single day because I really wasn't sure what was going to happen to us.
Yeah.
I think in those first, even less than 24 hours, I realized a lot of what was going to happen to us. Because when I met with the liaison, it was hours upon hours of, scheduled surgeries and what was going to happen. It was a pile of files that were, 6 inches thick or more, and just binder after binder. I remember her telling me that, I needed to just buckle up because 90% of the couples get divorced and children die. And I needed to get ready, and I needed to get prepared for this journey that we were getting ready to go on. About a week later, and we weren't able to leave. We couldn't leave at all. We were actually quarantined to our room and couldn't even leave our room.
Oh, gosh.
So about a week later, I was called to the genetics office, and the physicians told me that they found a rare, very rare genetic cancer gene that she has. And not only will she have one cancer, she will have 2 more cancers. So in the midst of all of this, trying to digest and understand what we were getting ready to go through, I then had to think about, this is our life. What does this mean? And that's when I really just started buckling down and researching, because I found out very quickly in the hospital that many things go wrong. There are a lot of mistakes that happen if you're not paying really close attention, if you're not with that person, if you're not advocating for them and for yourself. And Adrienne, that's one of the things that I really learned through this process. And I think that it was one of my strong points. I've been in sales, medical sales for, 20 years. And so I really had that ability to stand up for myself, question everything, document and record everything, and really just push boundaries. And I think that was one of the main reasons, that we did come through it, because it took years for us to get out of the hospital. And we would be there for a month at a time, and we would be released for about 24 to 48 hours. And then we would go back again for another 4 weeks.
Wow.
She had 70 some procedures under anesthesia within the first year. She had a full liver transplant, 6 rounds of chemotherapy. We were told she was going to have another liver transplant because during a liver biopsy, they nicked her liver and caved in her one bile duct that she had.
Oh, wow.
At that point, I really knew we were going to have to find something else. And my faith was wavering. I had really good days and I had really bad days. And I think anybody that has been in the hospital or in that system, they know. I mean, sitting in those rooms with those white walls and feeling that fear and just uncontrollable feelings and emotions, it's very difficult to maneuver and navigate through those situations.
Yeah. I can't imagine, like you said, it's like, I'm married, I've got 2 young kids, life is just going along just fine. And then in an instant, you're being told I mean, literally in an instant, you're in a room and they're saying, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Transplants, this and that. 90% of marriages fail. Like, you could lose your child. Like, talk about your entire life, your entire world being flipped upside down in an instant. And
Yes.
and probably and you're out of control of it, right? There's nothing you can do to change it other than you've talked about how you advocated for, but in that moment, you know what I'm saying? It has to feel like our lives were just completely changed, and it wasn't anything that any of us caused, and there isn't anything that we can do about it. That has to feel very, very scary. Like, I can't even imagine trying to, like, how do you go to work after that? How do you focus on anything after that? Like, how do you even keep going when something like that has happened? Because it feels like the pause button just got hit on like every single other thing in your life. And this is all you can focus on, and all of the effort and, is going into that. And so, like, in those moments, like during that time, it sounds like advocating for her became a full-time job. Like, what did that look like for your work, for your marriage? Like, what did that look like? Because I would imagine that you're there. Like you said, you were even quarantined. You couldn't even leave.
Yep. It was difficult. My husband and I lived completely different lives. I wasn't able to see my son or spend time with him. So of course, the guilt just starts laying layer after layer on you. And the loneliness, the fear, the isolation sets in. And I think for those out there that have been through this, or know somebody that has been through this, we had a huge amount of, outpour from people, and it was wonderful. Lots of communication, lots of love, prayers, people stopping by, gifts. It was wonderful. But that only lasted, a few weeks, and then they were gone.
They go
and
on
we
with
were
their
there
life
by ourselves.
Yeah.
And you really have to sit in that silence, and you really have to maneuver and strategize a plan. What are you going to do? Because I am not one of those individuals that sits around and waits for something to happen.
Yeah.
I'm one of those that sets a plan out. I'm extremely proactive. I questioned everything with the doctors, and it was very, very difficult for me to kind of keep my emotions in check. And then, having my husband at home living his separate life, and my son living his separate life, because when we went home, we started getting this pattern. And I remember going home a couple times praying and actually thanking God for a day or two of just being in our own home and being in my own atmosphere, and letting my daughter be able to be in her own bed and just feel normal for just a moment, just, a day or two. And I knew it would be time to go back, and we would receive that phone call almost like clockwork. And something had gone wrong with the blood work, or, we had gone, that day that we got out, or the next day we had, gone to get a treatment, or something had occurred, and, her levels spiked, and we were back in again. And so that was really tough, because I had to keep my mind frame very positive, because my daughter fed off of everything that I felt, all of my emotions. And the hospital is not it's not a great place to be. No matter how hard they may try, it's probably one of the loneliest places that you can be. And it's a bit desensitized in the way that, you're not treated human, and it's understandable. And I think we realized a lot about the hospital system when we were there. But the part of advocating, I advocated everything. The list just goes on and on and on the things that they missed, not reading allergy bans, and, giving her morphine a couple of times, which she's highly allergic to, and having arguments with the residents and the physicians to just read charts and read bans. And they were giving wrong medications, wrong doses. Wow. It was something, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're supposed to look out for.
You're relying on the experts to know. Yeah.
So, not that everything can go wrong in a hospital situation, but I think you need to be very aware. You have to be very open-minded, and you really just need to know that there has to be somebody there advocating for that individual because they desperately need it.
Yeah. Well, I know that, a lot has been done in the medical field to try to eliminate some of those mistakes because, even just like recently with my daughter having surgery, like there's like 3 or 4 people that'll ask you the same question. And you're thinking like, I already told you guys this, but it's like multiple people asking in an effort to try to prevent those things. But in the end, human beings are human beings, and we all make errors, we all make mistakes, we miss things, and it's not intentional, it's just, and you have multiple people changing shifts, coming in and out. And so, having to be there and advocate, I think we want to rely on the experts and say, hey, you just tell us what to do and put trust in them. But I think it's a really great thing for you to say, like, you still have to be paying attention and to know what's going on. And I imagine that had to be, like you said, like this full-time job that you had to take on as someone who wasn't an expert in that. At least you kind of worked in pharmaceutical sales. You had a little bit, but that still is, not all of it. I'm curious how, like, when I listen to what you just said, and I know you're just scratching the surface because we, are on the show here and we could talk about this for days, I'm sure. But, when I hear this, there's, I think, and the people listening, you kind of wonder, like, how would I respond to this? Right? Like, what would I do if I was in this situation? And I think a lot of us, I'll just say for myself, in the initial hearing what you're saying, I'm like, I don't think I could do that. Like, I don't think I would make it. Right. But you kind of don't have a choice, right? Like you kind of, it's like, we all think I wouldn't be able to handle that. And then you just handle it. And so I'm curious, during that time when you're going through this, part of it, your personality, you're like, I'm just not a person that's going to lay down. But like, there had to be moments, like you said, that were hard, that were bad, that felt lonely, isolated. Like, is there anything during that time that you're like, this is what got me through this, during those really, really difficult times?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually had a friend. I didn't know her. She worked for the same company that I worked for, but she was in a different state and she was in inside sales. And when I reached out to the company that I worked for to let them know what had happened, I was really reaching out to several different departments. And I ended up having a conversation with a gentleman. I can't even recall what department it was. He said, you may want to reach out to Kim. She and her daughter just landed in the hospital. Her daughter was diagnosed with cancer. Now, her daughter was a little bit older than Madison. I believe she was maybe 10, something like that. And I remember just thinking, I'll take anything that I can get. And I remember reaching out to her, and she and I became fast friends. We talked every single day, mostly through text. That was the one thing that carried me through. I don't think I would have gotten through without her.
Yeah.
And it shakes me even talking about it, as you can tell, to this day. Mm-hmm. I think we both needed each other so much because we had the ability to have those conversations with each other each day of what was happening.
Yeah.
We understood each other. We could kind of keep each other in check. We could talk about different perspectives, different questions, bounce things off of each other. And that was Kim. Her name was Kim, and she was my lifeline. And it was a godsend. Because I think, during those times, my faith was wavering a lot.
Yeah.
At first, especially. And then after that, it really was one of those things that I had to buckle down and understand that, God wasn't going to leave us there. There had to be another plan. There had to be another process, something else than what was, the darkness that I was currently in. There had to be something, outside of this that I just wasn't understanding.
Yeah.
And so it took on a situation where I think just being able to pray every single day and I think I prayed a little bit incorrectly. And I think we all do sometimes. It's like, please, Lord, take this away. I'll do anything. Please just, let me take her place. And so, my prayers did change. And I think it was more thankful, after that, going through with my friend and being able to be there with her. And I think once I really had that mind shift, it wasn't consistent. I had good days and bad days, but it was just that mind shift of positivity and being able to look at a brighter side. And, also challenging those physicians too. It allowed us, my family and I spoke with my husband, and we were really able to kind of open our minds to maybe, a different way, maybe functional medicine or holistic, chiropractic, just some different things that maybe we weren't looking at then. So that then kind of took my mind off of it. And I was on another, fast and furious journey to really kind of figure out what that looked like and see if there was anything, that we could do to kind of, increase our health and improve that situation.
Yeah. You mentioned the mind shift, and also earlier talking about like trying to maintain a positive outlook for your daughter, right? Because our children often do mirror the feelings that we're having or the things that we're thinking, and they can often just feel our anxiousness. Like we're so close to our children in that way. And, I know there's been times in my life where I tried to just put on a happy face, for my children's sake, but they could still feel like the tension that was underlying. And so you having Kim and being able, I think having someone you can be really honest with, because sometimes we can't really say what we're thinking, even to some of our closest friends. So I'd imagine that was very kind of therapeutic to be able to just be so honest and say exactly what you were thinking and feeling. But that had to be kind of difficult to manage I have these worries and these fears, but I'm trying to show up positive for my daughter. I don't want her to see that mom is scared or, mom is upset. And so, trying to balance those two feels really hard.
Yeah, and my husband was at home taking care of our son, and being in the hospital was not anything that he wanted to do. He spent one night in the hospital. I just needed a break. I needed 2 nights, and he made it one night. And at that point, I didn't understand. I think it was really tough for me to be that only person who had the strength to be there, because our family didn't go and stay with her. They didn't go see her. I mean, it's just, they couldn't handle even seeing her. They couldn't handle even talking about it. And my husband couldn't handle even being there. And I understood. I think the night that he spent, she actually was in PICU. She had been given morphine twice the night before. I think we were up for, 48 hours or something like that, because she was so allergic to morphine. And I begged them in the PICU not to give it to her. And they ended up giving it to her twice, actually. And like you said, there has been a lot of things improved with the hospital system. And I will say that there are some improvements. Things were very, very lacking 10 years ago. But, she was hooked up with, hundreds of wires, and she had a full liver transplant, and she had been given steroids and antibiotics. And it was a grim sight. I mean, anybody would just lose it, walking in. But, I remember just needing a little bit of a break. And I think after that, and being able to look back now, I do see exactly what had occurred. I mean, I think that there are certain things that we can all handle, but yet if we don't push ourselves to see if we can actually handle them and really lean into those uncomfortable things, I just don't think we get to the next stage of our life of where we're supposed to be. I've always been that person that leans into everything that is uncomfortable, because I'm so curious to why it makes me uncomfortable. I can't not figure out why it makes me uncomfortable. And I've always been that very curious individual, even back when I was a kid. So maybe that's another reason, why I was, able to be a guardian angel for my daughter.
Yeah.
But to your, statement again, I mean, your mind frame is huge. I mean, it's one of the first things that you have to manage. And I had to figure out, a new schedule. I was used to getting up 5 a.m. I would go run, I would work out, I'd take my dog out, take my kids to school, work. I had a routine. We ate healthy. Our lifestyle was extremely healthy. And, you have to really be okay with your entire world being ripped out from underneath you and you not having one constant thing that you had before. You have to be completely okay with that and be able to just pivot at every moving turn. And I guess that's what I was able to do, because within the hospital, we were able to change protocols. I actually formed and scheduled about 3 major meetings with all the department heads within the hospital and changed protocols. And I was very proud because I didn't want to see things continuing the way that they were for us. And I certainly didn't want anyone else to have to go through what we were going through and moving forward. So that was really important for me to really try to advocate, and for the hospital to recognize and see things that maybe others were not standing up for.
Yeah. Do you think, when you say that your husband went for a night and he was like, I can't do it, do you think if you hadn't been able to do it, that he would have been able to do it? Do you think that like it would have forced him to have that growth period? Or do you think, I'm just curious about that, because I'm like, if we had to do it, we would do it, right? So was it because you were available and willing to do it that he didn't have to do it?
I think so, but I also think that he's not leaned in to, and this is nothing against him, and he knows this, and now he leans into the more uncomfortable. He's just not one of those that leans into anything uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable, he doesn't do it.
Most people are that way.
person.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely okay. And I thought about that for years. If I wouldn't have been able to do it, he would have had to. I think he would have learned a lot about himself. The situation and the journey would have been completely different. I don't know what would have happened. I think things would have turned out okay. But I also know that, when you're forced to be in those situations, you don't have any other choice than to be strong. And I think for anyone out there, they really need to be kind of pushed, out of the nest and have those opportunities. Not that it has to be that scary, but it was a tough one. But I look back now, Adrienne, and I've told myself this for several years now. I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else but with her. I did need those breaks, but I think what I was able to do and how I was able to move the needle forward and really get through this in the manner that we did, I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere different. And I now know that it was the journey that I was supposed to be on. It was, the story that was already being written, and I didn't know it yet. And it is nice now being able to kind of look back through different lenses with a different perspective and see how everything really was kind of in line. Bumpy, scary, completely terrifying, absolutely. But it was how things were supposed to happen.
I love that. It's how things were supposed to happen. And, like you said, looking back, right? We can look back now, and that was 10 years ago. And I'd love to know, more of how she went through that and where she's at now. But when you look back, what are some of the beautiful blessings or things that you can look back and pull from it, even when it was probably the darkest, I'd imagine the darkest moments of your life? What beautiful things came from that?
I think, tragedy does make you put your life into perspective. Tragedy, any kind of tragedy, makes us all put our life into perspective. And being able to look back and know that we came through it, as a team, and my daughter was so strong. It's just one of those things that I'm very grateful for, but I also fought to be that 10%. I didn't want to be the 90% of couples, that got divorced. So it was extremely difficult to figure out how to manage and maneuver all of this. I think for me, I unfortunately didn't take care of myself. I put myself last, which, is something now I'm putting myself first. But I was able to put my daughter first and really help her through it. But I think I've taught my husband a lot about, advocating for people and being there and standing up for them. And I think he and I have a much stronger relationship now because, we understand each other much more. And I think we've been able to put ourselves in the other one's shoes and understand their side and see how we can, come forward and come through it. The situation, it was very tough on our son. He was 6. Yeah. And I remember, I think it was a couple of years later after, my daughter was diagnosed, I found his book bag and I opened up one of his little folders and he had a picture of his sister in there. And he had taken that to school every single day and never missed a day of having this beautiful picture of her in his folder. And I remember just the other day, he's almost 17 now. I remember asking him why, he did that. And he said he just needed to remember her the way that she was so he could, make it through the day and not feel so sad. And I just thought that was so sweet of just wanting to be able to remember her. And I understand it was very difficult watching her go through, what she went through, 6 rounds of chemotherapy.
On a little 3-year-old body.
Yeah.
I can't
we
even
didn't
imagine.
recognize
they're so little
her.
And they're so little and so precious, and just, I can't even imagine seeing your child go through that.
I think we're grateful for being able to come through it. I'm grateful for finding another alternative, the functional side of medicine. The body heals itself, just a totally new world opened up for us. And, back 10 years ago, it really wasn't spoken about too often, the alternative, holistic, functional.
And
I still talk to people now.
People would be like, what are you doing? Yeah.
And I talk to people now who still don't know what it is, but it's few and far between. I mean, there are so many more people that are getting into this. It's such a huge mission and movement. And that's one of my big, missions these days, is to really kind of advocate and open everyone's eyes to, it's not just one way, definitely look at other sides.
Yeah.
I actually got very sick when we were in the hospital. I got a really bad staph infection in my sinuses that went through my bloodstream. Oh, gosh. And I think it was at the point we had just been able to leave the hospital after several years being in the hospital. Like I said, I had really just not given myself the care that I needed. My body was just breaking down. Lack of sleep for years, and that kind of stress takes its toll on somebody, no matter, what shape they're in. And I remember I had a choice of, functional medicine, kind of this alternative holistic side, or being admitted into the hospital and having a PICC line put in me. And then they were just going to, give me every single antibiotic they possibly could. Yet I was already resilient to about 12 of the most potent antibiotics. And I remember just going, there's no choice. And so, the functional medicine alternative really took a huge turn in our life. And I'm thankful to be here today because I don't think that I would. That was a pivotal point in our life of realizing that was going to be a huge part of our life moving forward and really helping, everybody else, realize that too. Yeah. But, food is a huge thing too. And even though we were healthy, we really just continued to have to change even more and pivot and make sure that everything was extremely healthy. But that is one of the things that I advocated in the hospital. I was absolutely just mortified by what they fed patients as well as the doctors and nurses. It was really sad to see all of the changes in the hospital and how they had cut out, good, healthy food for, a smaller cost.
Yeah.
And the cost was monetary. They didn't realize or recognize, I think the big cost was the health and the lives of these physicians, nurses, patients, and parents that are living in that hospital each day. Yeah. And so for us, it was really advocating on healthy food. And so I talk about that in my book of the things that I did and what, the extremes that I went to. And I'm not sad or, scared to talk about it. It was a sad situation. And so we really just demanded that healthy food be brought into the hospital for her. And they grocery shopped for her about every other day and brought in exactly what we wanted on a grocery list that we would make out. And, I wasn't scared to demand in, what we needed. And we were there as a patient to get healthy. And that was one of the things that was very important. If we're not fed healthy food, I don't think that there's much else that we can, do for ourselves. Our body will certainly break down.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday. Her sister has cancer, and she was saying how her sister eats Frosted Flakes for breakfast every morning. And I'm like, I feel like most people, not everybody, but most people these days know that sugar is like the enemy of cancer. Like it just feeds cancer and just helps it grow.
Yes.
And that's the exact opposite thing that you should be feeding your body when you have cancer. And I think there's a level of unknowing. There are certainly people that just don't know any better and they don't know that. But I think there's also, and in that place, in that way, to me, there's a lack of education. Like if I would hope that my cancer doctor, the first thing they would say is you need to cut out all sugar immediately, right? Like you'd hope that the doctors would tell you that, right? Like, why do we have to know that already? And so, and then there's the other side of it of like, well, maybe it's a little bit of like, we all use food at some time or other. I always say I'm eating my emotions. It's like we use food to just feel better, right? And so it's like, oh, this sugary treat, I have cancer and I deserve this, or I want to treat myself, or it just makes me feel better, and not realize the harm that it's doing. So I think that sometimes there's both of that going on, right? Some of it is I just want to indulge, and some of it is a lack of education. But it really surprises me that the first thing out of the cancer doctor's mouth isn't you need to cut all the sugar out of your diet immediately, because food is a natural, I don't want to say healer, but like it does make a difference in our bodies and how healthy we get and how we heal. And I just think that, especially in America, I don't know if it's like that in other countries, but we're just not taught that. Like, and like you said, even I worked in the medical field when I was in the Air Force. I was a paramedic, and the pharmaceutical reps, what do they bring in? They bring in donuts and cake and cookies and everything for everybody in the office. And we're like, this is amazing. And like, we're just feeding poison to our bodies right there in the hospital.
Yep. Right there in the hospital, right underneath everyone's nose. And I think it's unfortunate, we believe what we see. We believe what we hear. We want to believe the doctors. We really just, we want to believe everything. And I understand that. It makes you feel good to feel that others are really watching out for you. And it's like we had talked before, it's not that they're not watching out for you. It's just they're not being proactive. They're not being taught. They don't have the ability these days to really have those conversations.
Yeah.
The hospitals are so limited. The rules, they're pretty much handcuffed, and what you can and cannot do, and changes just rarely ever happen. And so it's every change across the board rarely happens in hospitals because it's extremely hard to ever get those changes to take place. So I think that everybody really just needs to kind of take a step back, do their own research. Don't believe everybody, but certainly take a look at all those sides and really figure out what's best for you. Because I remember, after my daughter and I were able to get out, and we, it took us years to really try to get our bodies back, the way they were supposed to be, and then kind of figure out and manage and maneuver like, oh my gosh, what now? She was still followed by 12 teams, so we were always still living at the hospital, no matter if we lived there for a month at a time. She had 12 teams that followed her. But, just starting that healthy, really, really healthy, but we hadn't eaten overly unhealthy, but we, my daughter did enjoy sweets just like any kid does, but we just took those things out that she didn't need. And she was, gosh, I think she'd been healthy for, over 5 years, hadn't had, a sniffle, anything. And so I really think that there's something huge when it comes to just the environment that you're in, your mind frame, the food that you're eating, everything around you, the people you hang out with. You just have to create this new world for yourself that is something that many people just may not know how to do, where to go, how to find the resources. And then also they need accountability. We fall back into bad habits and things happen. So, but we don't have that luxury of we're through the cancer, yes, she's in remission, but we have 2 additional cancer diagnoses that are right around the corner. The next one, she's in the time frame between age 13 and 17, she will get colon cancer. Or supposedly get colon cancer
Mm.
based on the clinical trial of this genetic gene. But
Mm.
the great thing, Adrienne, that I feel that I can keep extremely positive with, and I really kind of set my mind to this, the genetic gene does not make money. So it's just one of those genes that they throw in the trash can. Doesn't make money. They don't care about it. They don't do any research. They don't run any more trials. The last trial that was ever run was like 30 years ago,
Mm.
and it was 17 individuals in this trial.
Wow.
So I made a pact to myself that we could outrun it. We could get around it. We could maybe figure out the trigger, the switches. We'll just make the body as healthy as possible, food and gut health and, the mind and body and soul. And that has been something that has kept me going. But it wasn't without a lot of, I think, heartache and falling back in those fearful places, because we're all human. If we know something bad is coming, it's really easy to be fearful.
Yeah.
If we don't know something's coming, we can still be very fearful,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, stress of just the unknown.
Whether we know it or not, we
had,
can find things to be afraid
we
of.
had this, this big, book telling us, this is what's going to happen. We had this clinical trial saying this is what's going to happen to her. But I've just really had to kind of muster up that courage to know that if we tell ourselves it's not going to happen again, we don't really think about it, but we still deal with it. We just don't make it our prime thought every
Right.
single day. I think we can make some huge changes against this genetic gene, and that's been my hope, and hope is one of my big words.
Yeah. So how have you changed? Like we all, I'm a believer that when hard things happen to us, we have a choice, right? We can either allow them to cause us to become depressed and hopeless and give up and believe that these things are happening to us and there's nothing we can do about them. Or we have a choice to look for the positive, to look for what are the opportunities here? What are the good things that come from this? What are the blessings? And so in going through this really hard thing and you had to just, I'm sure every single thing that you dealt with, it could either be a setback or it can make you stronger. And so looking back now and where you're at and even knowing what you have to face, curious how it changed you, like what you learned from it. And even if there's something that maybe your daughter learned from it, I'd love for you to share that as well.
Yeah, it really taught my daughter how to stand up for herself and for others. That was really important for me, for her to kind of take her own life in her own hands and be able to make those choices, healthy eating, healthy living, and what that looks like. I don't want to force anyone to do something that they don't want to do. I think we all have those choices. And so that was something huge for me. But, I learned that there is just such beauty through the pain that we've been through, all of the challenges and traumatic situations that we go through. There is something to be learned through it all. I mean, there is a reason, there is a purpose for the pain, and it is absolutely 100% true. You just have to search for it. So I think learning that is something that just happens. That's life, and life is never going to be easy. We're always going to be faced with something hard, and we talk about that divorce rate, that, or, your kids, something happening with them or some sort of diagnosis. It's really hard to maneuver. But I think if you have plans, you really set out a strategy of, how to overcome this. I had to look back and say, okay, I didn't handle that overly well. How can I set a better morning routine? How can I better manage my emotions? What next? I mean, I think we were handling them as best as we could, but I want to get better. Like I said, I may not have the luxury to, dodge these other two cancer diagnoses. And what then? How am I going to get through those even better? And so that was just one of my big goals, to really kind of work with my family on what is that going to look like if it happens next time. And if it doesn't, that is wonderful. Right. We've at least improved a lot of things in our life. Yeah. So it was finding, yoga and meditation and just a different morning strategy and something different that we did each morning to put our mind frame in a really positive place every single morning. Yeah. That was huge. Be consistent with our eating habits. And then also just, I think just cherish every single moment that we had. Try to live in the moment. And that was something that I was very fearful for. And I don't think I did it well. I was so worried about the next day and the future and what if, and I was drowning in today and tomorrow. And so I think for me, it was being able to live in today, to cherish the moment and really look at things through different lenses with a different perspective. And that's what I was able to do. I mentioned that earlier. I came to a surrender point about a year and a half or so ago, and I was in a bad place. I think I had just let a lot of the fear come back in, but also I think I was having some rattlings with, there was something else that I think I was built for, something else that I needed to do, and it was based on the experiences that we had been through.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized through some pretty treacherous times and feeling as though, I was having to relive a lot of the memories from the last, about 8.5 years at that point, that I needed to write a book. One, I really needed to get my feelings out and I needed to heal.
Yeah.
But there was just something burning inside of me saying, if I can help one person or a couple of people or one person every day to know that they can do it, they can do anything that they set their mind to. If something is really scary in front of them, don't give up. Don't feel bad to ask for help. Don't feel bad to advocate. You really you can do this. We're not alone. But I think so many times right now, people are feeling very lonely, very lost, maybe feeling as though they've lost their identity. And so this book was extremely healing for me. I wrote it all last year, worked with a publishing company, worked with a ghostwriter, and it was excruciatingly painful. I think I quit about a dozen times. I was done. I couldn't.
What was so hard about it?
Couldn't do it.
Was it reliving the story again?
Reliving it. But what I had to realize was that I was being given the opportunity to look back through those different lenses and see things in a different perspective. One, to heal myself, but two, to heal my marriage. That was huge because I was resentful. I was angry. I was fearful. I was sad. We weren't on the same page. We weren't putting ourselves in the other one's shoes. And I had the ability to look back and change my perspective. And that changed the entire trajectory of how things have moved forward the last couple of years. So the book was wonderful, and it just launched a couple of weeks ago. So I'm finally through that stage, and I'm really happy to be through that stage.
Yeah, I think that I can imagine having to relive all that. Like you kind of feel like, oh, we made it through that. I can put that behind me now. And then the book is like, oh no, like let's bring all this back up, and having to relive through that. And I agree. I'm a believer that our pain always has a purpose. If we allow it to. Pain is never meant to be wasted, and it is often meant to be used not just for us to grow, but also to be able to help others. That it's not just a singular event that's happening to us or for us or any of those things. It can be for others, and I think it's great that you listened to that stirring inside of you, and even though it was hard to feel those things again, that you kept on going, because it sounds like it had a huge impact on your marriage as well, and carrying those resentments. It's hard to put yourself in the other person's shoes, but like you said, just a change of perspective and how you were viewing things allowed you to start the healing process in your marriage. And I think too many people are waiting on the other person to do something or a certain specific thing to happen, and they don't realize that it can be, the healing can begin just by changing the way that we choose to see things, right? So I think that's really beautiful. And the other thing that you said that I think is really important, and I've been telling myself a lot this lately, and this doesn't compare to your story at all, but just being in a really busy season of life that feels very overwhelming, I have to keep telling myself, like, just enjoy the moment, like just live in the moment, take it day by day, focus on like experiencing what's happening right now instead of all the things you have to take care of and all the things you have to do. Like if we can just stay in the moment, it allows us to not, number one, to be able to be more grateful. But also number two, like you said, you were carrying everything for today and for tomorrow. And that's too much to carry. And so if we can stay focused on today and enjoying the good of the moment, but then also not worrying about what could be in the future, I think can help. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I had to give myself grace. I've realized for the first time in my life, I really had to give myself grace. For anybody out there, that's a high performer, really, really focused on everything, being at the highest quality, the house is always clean, the job is great, the family looks good, everything's done, just high performers. I mean, I am just one of those kind of over the top OCD type of individuals. And when my life crumbled, I learned just such a huge lesson of I have no control. Like I learned I have no control. And for those who think they have control out there, there's so many things we really just don't have control of. And so I had to lay down the thought that I could change those things that I had no control of. And I could change my mind frame and my perspective, and I could give myself grace. And it was actually okay to give myself grace. And it was really okay to give myself self-love and self-care. And that's really where a lot of the, meditation and yoga and breath works and, just reading all the time and giving myself just those moments of, okay, I can't do it today. I just need to take a step back, where before I would have just absolutely just bulldozed and pushed through it. And then I would have been sick. I was sick for so many years, and I just did not give myself what I needed. So that was huge. But yes, like you said, it did help my marriage. I was able to really look at that perspective through my lenses as well as my husband's lenses. We were able to really just kind of come to the table and go, okay, I didn't know that. How are you feeling? Really have those conversations. And we had to just pull up the rug. The rug was so high, we couldn't see over it at that point. We had just pushed everything underneath it and just felt it was okay. We're fine. She's better now. We can just move on. But that rug was rumbling. It was just rumbling and rumbling. And I really needed to just jerk it up. And once I did, it was a huge tornado. And that tornado was last year, but I can honestly say a beautiful book came out of it. And we've had just huge response. I mean, the support that I have received and the messages have been so heartfelt. I mean, I've been in tears. And my biggest fear was that nobody would like it and that I would be judged. And, you have to put all those thought processes away.
Yeah.
But I want to also mention, for anybody out there that just has this burning, this passion, maybe, I don't know, rumbling, they're not able to sleep at night. They're just feeling as though they're having something happening in them. It was happening in me too. And I realized that through this pain and what we had been through and everything that we had learned, I had actually built something pretty cool for the preparation. And I actually launched a group called Advocacy and Hope. And that spurred from the book. So that's a Facebook group. And then it has spurred to another big community that I have created. And I created a podcast called Advocacy and Hope.
That's amazing.
And I really hope that it can give the encouragement, love, gratitude, and a safe place for everyone. So I'm in the mix of everything right now. We had finalized the community, but I want people to have a really safe, great place to come to where they can find resources, and at whatever stage they are in, whatever they've been through in a traumatic situation. I just want everybody to be able to come together in a unity, in a place where they can just be accounted for and loved and know that they're not alone, because, man, the world is really getting kind of crazy right now. And I think more and more people are just feeling alone for so many reasons. And if a traumatic situation hits them, I think it's even harder for us to know where to turn or what to do. So this community is what I'm absolutely so excited about. But another thing I just joined in congruence with a small group of individuals, and we're working with Make-A-Wish. And we have created a once a year big event we're doing in July, getting celebrities. And our goal, this year is 200,000. And I think it will go up every single year. But it's something that it was a very important piece of our journey, because the Make-A-Wish is something I don't think that you can even explain. It's almost just not even explainable. When I was sitting in the group, I was telling everybody that I had to be involved in this because this was something that my daughter looked so forward to, getting that wish. And even though the trip was pushed back, we couldn't go on our first one. It was just heart-wrenching. Every time we turned a corner, just the floor fell out for us. There was just never a moment where we're like, are we going to get a break?
Right.
And she was able to look forward to this Disney trip that was given to us by Make-A-Wish. Her Make-A-Wish family was phenomenal. And it was just one of the greatest experiences that gave us something that I think for the first time we really saw enjoyment and hope and just something very, very special. So I'm dedicated to that organization now forever.
I love that. So tell us the name of the book, and tell us if people want to know more about whether they can join your Facebook group or they can get your book or anything. Yeah. Tell us where people can go to find out more.
Yeah. So my book is called Out of the Gray Into the Light. It's a mother's memoir of advocacy and hope. And you can go to my website. It's amypost.com. It's amypost.com. You can order it from my website. It'll take you to an area where you can order it from Amazon, Target, Walmart. But also you can read a little bit about our story. And we are building the website out a bit more. You'll be able to subscribe to a really great newsletter that we put out each week. Also, you can join the community. You can just hear and see all the great things that are going on. You can watch the podcasts. I try to, just really get involved now and interview people with amazing stories that have come through just huge challenges and just, wrap my arms around them. So that website is a really great place that people can find me. But you can also look up Advocacy and Hope on Facebook and ask to be a part of the group as well.
Awesome. Well, Amy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I know it can be hard to recount those times, but you are making such a difference for people and helping them to get through really traumatic things. So I'm honored to have you here, and thank you for sharing.
Oh, Adrienne, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. This story was a remarkable testament to human resilience, courage, and perseverance. To help you manage the ups and downs of your own life journey, I have a special gift for you called the Resilience Playbook. This free guide includes 12 resilience factors that gave me hope, inspiration, and empowerment during some of my darkest times. Whether you're navigating the ups and downs of a relationship, maybe you're facing unexpected twists in your career or your business, or you're tackling personal health challenges, whatever that challenge is in your life today, this playbook will equip you with the tools you need to strengthen your resilience muscle. To get your copy, find me on Instagram and send me a DM with the words playbook, or you can simply click the link in the show notes. Before we part ways today, I want to remind you that you can do hard things, and that strength lies within you just waiting to be unveiled. I hope you'll carry the lessons shared today with you as you grow, evolve, and strengthen your resolve. If you enjoyed this episode, be a good friend and share it with someone you know could use it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Until next time, take care, my friend.